It was a cold Christmas Eve in the small town of Willow Creek, a place where traditions and whispers wove through the streets like the chill of winter air. Snow fell softly, blanketing the town in a pristine white glow. Emma Clark, the owner of the town's beloved diner, Emma's Table, glanced out the frosted window, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. Business had been slow lately, too slow. The holidays used to bring life and laughter to her little diner, but this year, it seemed the festive cheer had bypassed her entirely. Bills piled on her desk in the back office, and the thought of keeping the diner afloat into the new year felt like a distant dream. Emma sighed and pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, though she was inside. The heater had broken down again, and the cost of repair was another expense she couldn't afford. She had hoped for more customers tonight, but most of the townsfolk were likely gathered at home, sharing meals with their families. The flickering, open, sign on her door felt more like a beacon of desperation than an invitation. The bell above the diner door jingled, breaking the silence. Emma straightened up instinctively, pasting on her warmest smile despite the fatigue tugging at her. She turned to greet the customer but paused when she saw the man who entered. He was tall, his frame bulky beneath a worn, oversized coat. His hair was unkempt, his face partially obscured by a scruffy beard that looked like it hadn't met a razor in weeks. Snow clung to his boots, leaving wet patches on the tiled floor. "Evening," the man said, his voice low and rough as if it hadn't been used much recently. His eyes, though weary, held a certain depth that Emma couldn't quite place. "Evening," she replied, her voice tinged with hesitation. "Take a seat wherever you like." The man nodded and shuffled to a booth in the far corner of the diner, away from the windows and the festive garlands Emma had half-heartedly hung earlier in the month. He sat quietly, his large hands resting on the table, but he didn't pick up the menu. Emma hesitated for a moment before grabbing a notepad and walking over. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Something warm to eat?" The man looked up at her, his gaze steady. I don't have any money," he admitted, his voice softening. "I just needed a place to sit for a bit. I won't bother you for long." Emma studied him for a moment. The diner was nearly empty, save for one couple at a booth near the counter, engrossed in their conversation. She thought about the dwindling till, the unpaid bills, and the voice in her head that told her she couldn't afford to give handouts. But then she looked back at the man, really looked at him. Beneath the layers of weariness and the rough exterior, there was something vulnerable, almost dignified, about him. "Stay as long as you need," Emma said gently. "And don't worry about the money. Christmas is no time to go hungry." The man's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He nodded, murmuring a quiet thank you, as Emma walked back to the counter. She set about preparing a simple but hearty meal, a bowl of her homemade beef stew, a thick slice of bread, and a cup of coffee. She carried the tray to his table, setting it down with a smile. "There you go. It's on the house," she said, brushing off his attempts to protest. As he ate, Emma busied herself with cleaning up the already spotless diner. She couldn't help but steal glances at him. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the first meal he'd had in days. His posture, though slightly slouched, carried an air of someone who wasn't accustomed to accepting help, someone who might once have been proud but was now weathered by life's storms. When he finished, he sat back, cradling the coffee mug in his hands. Emma approached his table to clear the dishes. "Was it all right?" she asked. "It was more than all right," the man replied, his voice sincere. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Emma waved a hand dismissively. "You don't need to. Just, pay it forward someday if you can." The man smiled faintly, and for the first time, it seemed genuine. "What's your name?" "Emma." "And you?" "Michael," he said after a brief pause, as if he hadn't said his own name in a while. They fell into a quiet conversation, the kind that happens when two strangers connect on a human level. Michael asked about the diner, and Emma shared its history, how her father had opened it decades ago, how it had been the heart of the community, and how she was struggling to keep it alive. She didn't mean to spill so much, but there was something about Michael's quiet presence that made it easy to talk. "You're doing something important here," Michael said, his tone thoughtful. "It's rare these days. Places like this, they matter." Emma shrugged, smiling wistfully. "It doesn't feel like it matters much anymore. Not when the bills keep piling up." Michael didn't respond immediately. He stared into his coffee as if deep in thought, and Emma excused herself to give him space. As the night wore on, the other couple left, and the diner grew silent save for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the back. Michael eventually stood, pulling his coat tightly around him. "Thank you, Emma," he said, his voice steady. "I won't forget this." "Take care, Michael," Emma replied, watching as he stepped out into the snowy night. She didn't expect to see him again, but something about their encounter lingered with her as she locked up the diner and headed home. What Emma didn't know was that Michael had come to Willow Creek for a reason. His appearance and demeanor had been deliberate, a way to strip away the layers of his former life and connect with people on a genuine level. And while Emma went to bed that night thinking she had merely helped a stranger in need, Michael was already planning how he could repay her kindness in ways she couldn't imagine. That Christmas Eve, Emma had no idea that her small act of generosity would set off a chain of events that would not only change her life but the entire town of Willow Creek. Emma woke up the next morning to a cold house, the kind of chill that crept into her bones and refused to leave. The old radiator in her modest home was on its last legs, just like the diner, and she wrapped herself in a thick robe before heading to the kitchen to make coffee. As she waited for the pot to brew, her thoughts drifted to the stranger from the night before. Michael. There was something about him that had stuck with her, a quiet sorrow, a dignity that didn't match his disheveled appearance. The day began as most days did, with Emma heading to the diner before sunrise. The streets were still and silent, the aftermath of Christmas celebrations evident in the faint glow of holiday lights and the occasional discarded wrapping paper blowing across the pavement. Emma parked her old car behind the diner and stepped inside, flipping on the lights. The familiar hum of the appliances greeted her, a small comfort amidst her worries. As she prepared for the day, Emma thought back to her father. He had built Emma's table with his bare hands, pouring his heart into every detail. The diner wasn't just a business, it was a symbol of their family's resilience, a place where the community had come together for decades. But now, that legacy felt like a weight on her shoulders. The diner was struggling, and Emma didn't know how much longer she could keep it open. By mid-morning, the usual crowd had trickled in, Mrs. Johnson, who came every day for her tea and scones, Mr. Miller, a retired mechanic who liked to sit by the window and read the paper, and a few truckers passing through town. It was enough to keep Emma busy but not enough to bring in the revenue she needed. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for giving Michael that free meal the night before. Every penny counted, and while she didn't regret her decision, she knew it was a luxury she couldn't afford. Around noon, the door jingled, and Emma looked up to see a man in a crisp suit step inside. He was out of place in Willow Creek, his polished appearance a stark contrast to the worn flannel shirts and jeans of the locals. He glanced around before walking up to the counter. "Are you Emma Clark?" he asked, his voice polite but businesslike. "Yes," Emma replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the counter. "This is for you." Emma stared at the envelope, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "I'm not at liberty to say," the man replied. "But the sender wanted me to assure you it's legitimate." Before Emma could ask any more questions, the man turned and left, leaving her standing there with the envelope in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing a neatly folded letter and a cashier's check. She unfolded the letter first, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting. Dear Emma, kindness is a rare and beautiful thing, especially when it's given without expectation of anything in return. Last night, you showed me a generosity that reminded me of the goodness in people. Please accept this gift as a token of my gratitude. Use it to keep your diner running, to help your community, or for whatever you see fit. I only ask that you continue to be the light that you already are. Yours sincerely, Michael. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she unfolded the check. Her eyes widened as she saw the amount, $50,000. For a moment, she thought it must be a mistake. $50,000? Who was this man? Her hands shook as she folded the letter and check back into the envelope. She looked around the diner, half expecting Michael to walk through the door again, but he didn't. The questions swirled in her mind. Why would he give her such a large amount of money? What was his story? And why had he chosen her? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma couldn't concentrate, her thoughts consumed by the mystery of Michael and the gift he had left her. She didn't tell anyone about the check, not even her best friend Sarah, who came by the diner that afternoon for coffee. The weight of the secret felt almost too much to bear, but Emma didn't know how to explain it to anyone, not yet. As evening fell, Emma sat alone in the back office, staring at the check on her desk. She thought about the bills she could pay, the repairs she could make, the improvements she had dreamed of for the diner but had never been able to afford. She also thought about the letter, about Michael's request that she use the money to help her community. The words lingered in her mind, sparking an idea she hadn't considered before. What if this wasn't just about the diner? What if she could do more? The next morning, Emma made a decision. She called a local contractor and scheduled a meeting to discuss repairing the diner's heating system and upgrading the kitchen. Then she reached out to the town council to propose an initiative to provide free meals for families in need, funded by a portion of Michael's gift. She didn't know how the town would react, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Word spread quickly about Emma's plans, and soon, the diner was buzzing with excitement. People began to pitch in, offering their time, skills, and resources to help make Emma's vision a reality. The once empty diner was now filled with volunteers painting, cleaning, and preparing meals for the first community dinner Emma had planned. Amidst the flurry of activity, Emma couldn't help but wonder if Michael knew what he had set in motion. She hadn't seen or heard from him since that Christmas Eve, but his presence was everywhere, in the smiles of the people coming together, in the laughter that echoed through the diner, and in the hope that had returned to Willow Creek. As she stood in the center of the bustling diner, watching her dream come to life, Emma felt a surge of gratitude. Michael had given her more than just money, he had given her a second chance, a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but she hoped that, somehow, he knew the difference he had made. Little did she know, Michael was closer than she thought, quietly watching from the shadows as the town came alive with the spirit of generosity and community. And while Emma believed she had seen the full extent of his gift, the truth was that Michael had more surprises in store, ones that would change her life and the lives of everyone in Willow Creek forever. The town of Willow Creek had always been a quiet, unassuming place, but in the weeks following Emma's mysterious windfall, something remarkable began to stir. The transformation of Emma's table into a hub of generosity and warmth brought with it a renewed energy that seemed to ripple through the entire community. For the first time in years, the diner buzzed with life, not just from customers but from volunteers, families, and individuals who found solace in its comforting atmosphere. Emma poured herself into her work, but not in the way she used to. Before, it had been about survival, about keeping her father's legacy alive against impossible odds. Now, it was about something bigger. The repairs to the diner were well underway, thanks to Michael's gift. The heating system had been replaced, and the kitchen had been modernized, but Emma's vision extended far beyond new appliances and fresh coats of paint. She had used part of the money to start a Meals for All program, offering free meals to anyone in the community who needed them, no questions asked. Word spread quickly, and soon, families who had struggled to make ends meet were gathering at Emma's table. Some came hesitantly at first, unsure of whether they belonged, but Emma welcomed each person with the same warmth and kindness she had shown Michael that fateful Christmas Eve. Slowly but surely, the walls of pride and isolation that had built up in the town began to crumble. One day, as Emma stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for a group of volunteers, the diner door jingled, and a familiar face stepped inside. It was Sarah, her best friend, who had been watching Emma's transformation with equal parts admiration and curiosity. Sarah slid onto a stool at the counter and rested her elbows on the freshly polished surface. "You've got the whole town talking," Sarah said with a grin. "Emma Clark, the patron saint of Willow Creek." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "I'm no saint. I just want to make a difference." "Well, you're doing it," Sarah replied. "But I have to ask, where did all this come from? The repairs, the program. You've never had the resources for something like this before." Emma hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about Michael or the check, not even Sarah. Part of her felt that revealing the truth might somehow diminish the magic of what was happening. But she also knew that Sarah deserved to know, especially since she had been by her side through so many tough times. "It's a long story," Emma began, lowering her voice as she leaned closer. "Do you remember that man who came in on Christmas Eve? The one who didn't have money for food?" Sarah nodded, her expression curious. "The quiet guy in the big coat? What about him?" Emma glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening. "His name is Michael. He left me a letter, and a check for $50,000. Sarah's eyes widened. $50,000? Are you serious?" Emma nodded. "He didn't tell me much about himself, but he said he wanted me to use the money to help the community. And that's what I'm trying to do." Sarah stared at her for a moment, then shook her head in disbelief. "Emma, that's incredible. But who is this guy? Why would he give you that kind of money?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "I've been trying to figure it out ever since. There's something about him, something familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it." As the days turned into weeks, Emma couldn't shake the mystery of Michael. She found herself scanning the faces of the people who walked through the diner's door, wondering if he would ever return. She asked around town, hoping someone might have seen him, but no one knew anything about a man matching his description. Meanwhile, the community continued to rally around Emma's efforts. Local businesses began donating supplies, and high school students volunteered to help serve meals. The diner became a gathering place not just for those in need but for anyone who wanted to be part of something meaningful. Emma's table was no longer just a diner, it was a symbol of hope and connection. One snowy afternoon, Emma was in the back office, going over the books, when she heard a commotion in the front of the diner. She stepped out to find a group of people gathered near the counter, their voices buzzing with excitement. At the center of the crowd was an older woman holding a folded piece of paper. Her name was Margaret, and she was one of the regulars who had started coming to the diner since the Meals for All program began. "What's going on?" Emma asked, making her way through the crowd. Margaret turned to her, her face flushed with emotion. "Emma, you won't believe this. I just got a letter from him." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "From who?" "From Michael," Margaret said, holding up the paper. "He left me a check, just like he did for you." The crowd murmured in astonishment as Margaret unfolded the letter and read it aloud. It was similar to the one Emma had received, filled with words of encouragement and a request to use the money for good. The amount on Margaret's check was smaller, $10,000, but it was enough to cover her medical bills and keep her home out of foreclosure. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat as she listened. Michael wasn't just helping her, he was helping others, quietly and anonymously. The realization filled her with a mix of gratitude and determination. Whoever Michael was, he believed in the power of kindness, and Emma was determined to honor his faith in her and her community. Over the next few weeks, more stories like Margaret's began to surface. A struggling single father received funds to repair his truck and start his own business. A young artist was given the resources to open a gallery in town. Each letter carried the same message, a reminder of the impact one person could have when they chose to act with compassion. As the diner became the epicenter of these stories, Emma couldn't help but wonder if Michael was still in Willow Creek, watching from the sidelines. She longed to thank him, to tell him how much his generosity had changed not just her life but the lives of so many others. One evening, as the last of the volunteers were leaving and the diner was quiet once again, Emma stood at the counter, staring out the window at the falling snow. The bell above the door jingled, and she turned, half expecting to see another volunteer or a late-night customer. Instead, there he was. Michael, his coat dusted with snow, his eyes meeting hers with the same quiet intensity she remembered from Christmas Eve. "Michael," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Hello, Emma. It's been a while." Emma felt a surge of emotion, relief, gratitude, curiosity, all at once. "You've been here, haven't you? All this time?" Michael nodded. "I wanted to see what you would do. And you didn't disappoint." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she approached him. "Why me, Michael? Why this town? Why any of it?" Michael hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "Because kindness deserves to be rewarded. And because people like you remind the world that there's still hope." In that moment, Emma knew she had found not just a benefactor but a kindred spirit. And though she still didn't know everything about Michael, she realized it didn't matter. What mattered was the impact his actions had made, and the legacy they would continue to build together. As the snow continued to fall outside the diner, Emma and Michael sat across from each other in the booth where he had first sat on Christmas Eve. The diner was empty now, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft glow of the fairy lights Emma had strung along the windows. Michael's presence felt surreal, like a ghost from a dream suddenly made flesh. Emma wrapped her hands around her mug of tea, her thoughts a swirl of questions she hardly knew how to put into words. Michael sat quietly, his gaze steady and calm. His rugged coat still carried snowflakes that were melting into tiny water droplets, and his beard was neatly trimmed now, giving him a more polished appearance. Despite the changes, the air of quiet mystery around him remained. "Michael," Emma began, her voice soft but tinged with urgency, "I don't even know where to start. You've done so much for me, for this town, and I don't understand why. You're not just some passerby, are you?" Michael smiled faintly, leaning back against the booth. "No, Emma, I'm not. But my story isn't as glamorous as you might think." Emma waited, her heart pounding as Michael took a long sip of his coffee. For the first time, he seemed ready to open up, to shed the layers of mystery that had surrounded him since that fateful night. "I wasn't always this man you see in front of you," he began. "Years ago, I lived a very different life, a life filled with luxury and excess, but also emptiness. I was born into wealth. My family owned a massive corporation that spanned industries across the globe. I inherited everything when my father passed, but the responsibilities didn't bring me fulfillment. They only made me feel trapped." He paused, his eyes distant, as if he were sifting through memories he hadn't touched in years. "For a while, I convinced myself that money could solve every problem. I threw it at charities, at friends, at anything that made me feel like I was doing something worthwhile. But it was all surface level. I didn't know the people I was helping, and they didn't know me. I became disillusioned. What good was wealth if it couldn't create genuine connections?" Emma listened intently, her earlier questions fading as she became engrossed in Michael's story. "About a year ago, Michael continued, something happened that changed everything. My sister, the only family I had left, passed away unexpectedly. She was the heart of our family, the one who always reminded me that life was about more than just money. Her death shook me to my core. I decided to step away from everything, the boardrooms, the meetings, the life I'd built. I needed to find something real. Michael's voice faltered for a moment, and Emma could see the pain in his eyes. That's how I ended up here, in Willow Creek. I wanted to strip away all the trappings of my old life and see the world through a different lens. I didn't expect to stay long, but then I met you. Emma blinked, startled. Me? Michael nodded. That night at the diner, when you gave me a meal without knowing who I was or expecting anything in return, it reminded me of what my sister used to tell me, that the smallest acts of kindness can change lives. You didn't just feed me, Emma. You restored my faith in people. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat. She had always thought of herself as an ordinary woman, doing her best to get by. To hear Michael speak of her in such a profound way was almost overwhelming. But why the money, she asked. Why not just tell me who you were from the start? Michael smiled gently. Because I wanted to see what you would do with it. I've seen what happens when people are given money without a purpose. It corrupts, it divides. But you took that gift and turned it into something extraordinary. You didn't just save your diner, you lifted your entire community. That's rare, Emma. That's special. Emma's mind raced, replaying the events of the past weeks. The Meals for All program, the volunteers, the letters Michael had sent to others in the town, it all made sense now. He hadn't just given her money, he had given her a chance to build something meaningful, to become a catalyst for change. Do you plan to stay in Willow Creek? Emma asked after a long silence. Michael hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. I don't know. This place has given me a lot, but I never intended to stay anywhere permanently. My life has always been about moving forward, about searching for the next thing. Emma felt a pang of disappointment but pushed it aside. Whatever you decide, I want you to know how much you've changed my life. Not just with the money, but with your belief in me. I'll never forget it. Michael reached across the table, his hand resting briefly on hers. The truth is, Emma, you've changed my life too. More than you'll ever know. As they sat there, the weight of their shared connection settled between them like a warm blanket against the cold. For the first time, Emma saw Michael not as a mysterious benefactor or a wealthy stranger but as a man searching for meaning in a world that often felt hollow. And in him, Michael saw the strength and resilience of someone who could turn even the smallest spark of hope into a blazing fire. Their conversation stretched late into the night, weaving stories of their pasts and dreams of the future. Michael shared more about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. Emma told him about her father, the diner, and the community that had shaped her life. By the time the clock struck midnight, the snow outside had stopped, leaving the world blanketed in a peaceful, untouched silence. As Michael stood to leave, he turned to Emma with a thoughtful expression. You once asked me why I came to Willow Creek. The truth is, I didn't choose this town. It chose me. And now I see why. Emma smiled, her heart full. Whatever brought you here, Michael, I'm glad it did. With a final nod, Michael stepped out into the night, leaving Emma standing at the door. She watched as he disappeared into the shadows, her mind filled with a mix of gratitude, curiosity, and hope. Though she didn't know it yet, Michael's impact on Willow Creek was far from over. His presence had set in motion a series of events that would continue to shape the town and its people in ways Emma could never have imagined. And as she turned off the diner's lights and locked the door, she felt a quiet certainty that her story, and Michael's, was only just beginning. The days that followed Michael's late-night visit to the diner were unlike anything Emma had ever experienced. The community of Willow Creek was alive with a new sense of purpose, thanks to the programs Emma had started with Michael's generous gift. The diner, once a humble meeting spot for locals, had become the heart of the town, a place where hope and opportunity were served alongside steaming cups of coffee. But as Emma threw herself into her work, a sense of unease began to creep in. Michael had left no indication of where he was going or whether he planned to return. His words from that night echoed in her mind, how he was always searching for the next thing, the next purpose. She wanted to believe that his journey had brought him to Willow Creek for a reason, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping through her fingers. The town, however, seemed to thrive in his absence. Families who had once been on the brink of despair now found themselves with a renewed sense of stability. The Meals for All program had grown into something much larger than Emma had anticipated. Local farmers and grocery stores began donating surplus food, high school students volunteered to deliver meals to elderly residents, and even neighboring towns took notice, sending their own contributions. It wasn't long before a reporter from a regional newspaper arrived to cover the story. Emma was hesitant at first, worried about drawing too much attention to the diner or the mysterious man behind the initial funding. But after some convincing from Sarah, Emma agreed to an interview. She carefully avoided mentioning Michael by name, referring to him only as a kind stranger who had inspired her to give back. The article was published a week later, complete with a photo of Emma standing in front of the diner, surrounded by smiling volunteers. The headline read, "Small Town Diner Becomes Beacon of Hope Thanks to Acts of Kindness." The story went viral, spreading far beyond the borders of Willow Creek. Letters and emails began pouring in from people who had been touched by the story. Some offered donations, while others shared their own tales of kindness and resilience. Emma read each one, often moved to tears by the sheer volume of humanity and goodwill the article had unearthed. But not all of the attention was positive. A few skeptics in town began to question the sudden windfall that had allowed Emma to transform the diner and launch the programs. Whispers about the mystery benefactor circulated, with some accusing Emma of hiding something. The question stung, but Emma kept her head high, focusing on the good she was doing and refusing to let doubt creep into her heart. One snowy evening, as Emma was closing up the diner, a knock at the window startled her. She turned to see a man standing outside, bundled in a thick coat, his face partially obscured by a scarf. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, she thought it was Michael. But as she opened the door, she realized it was someone else, a man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. "Are you Emma Clark?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold air. "I am," Emma replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man hesitated before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a folded piece of paper. "I think this might explain everything." Emma unfolded the paper and recognized the handwriting immediately. It was another letter from Michael. "Dear Emma, by now, you've likely guessed that my time in Willow Creek was never meant to be permanent. But I couldn't leave without ensuring that the seeds we planted together would continue to grow. The man standing before you is Daniel Harper, an old friend and someone I trust implicitly. He has the resources and the experience to help you take your vision even further. Trust him as you've trusted me. As for me, my journey continues. But know that you have restored something in me that I thought was lost forever. The work you're doing here, it's what the world needs more of. Keep going, Emma. Keep believing in the power of kindness. Until we meet again. Michael." Emma's hands trembled as she finished reading the letter. She looked up at Daniel, who was watching her with a warm, understanding expression. "Michael asked me to come here," Daniel explained. "He told me about the work you're doing, and I want to help in any way I can. I run a foundation that supports community initiatives like yours. If you're willing, I'd like to partner with you to expand your programs, maybe even create something that other towns can replicate." Emma was stunned. The thought of taking her work beyond Willow Creek had never crossed her mind. She had been so focused on saving the diner and helping her neighbors that she hadn't considered the possibility of a larger impact. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "This is all so unexpected." Daniel smiled. "Take your time to think about it. I'm not here to pressure you. I just want to honor Michael's faith in both of us." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Daniel worked closely together, brainstorming ways to grow the programs and ensure their sustainability. With Daniel's expertise and resources, they were able to secure additional funding, hire staff, and even start a job training program for unemployed residents. The diner became the headquarters for a network of community initiatives, from food drives to mentorship programs. But even as the projects flourished, Emma couldn't stop thinking about Michael. She wondered. Had driven the reservoir project. As the weeks turned into months, Rivertown began to transform in ways no one had anticipated. The water management system became a point of pride, drawing attention from neighboring towns and even state officials. Journalists came to document the project, sharing the story of how an ordinary town had achieved something extraordinary. The attention brought new opportunities, including grants and partnerships that allowed Rivertown to pursue even more ambitious projects. For Emma, the experience was life-changing. She had always dreamed of becoming an engineer, but the project had given her a newfound sense of purpose. She decided to stay in Rivertown for a while longer, putting her college plans on hold to continue working with Sam and the community. Together, they launched a series of DIY workshops, teaching residents how to build, repair, and innovate. The workshops were a hit, drawing participants of all ages and fostering a culture of creativity and collaboration. Sam, too, found himself invigorated by the experience. He had spent most of his life quietly solving problems, never seeking recognition or praise. But now, he realized that his skills and ideas could inspire others, and that was a legacy worth leaving behind. He continued to tinker in his garage, but now his projects were often collaborative, with neighbors dropping by to contribute their own ideas and learn from his expertise. One evening, as Sam and Emma sat on the porch of his house, watching the sun set over the town, they reflected on how far Rivertown had come. The reservoir gleamed in the distance, a reminder of their journey and the power of community. "Do you think this will last?" Emma asked, her voice thoughtful. "The energy, the collaboration, the sense of purpose?" Sam smiled, his gaze steady. "It will if we let it," he said. "Projects like this don't just build systems, they build people. And as long as we keep believing in each other, there's nothing we can't do." Emma nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. "Then let's keep building," she said. "Not just systems, but a future worth fighting for." And so, Rivertown continued its journey, a small town with a big heart, proving that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they came together. As the months turned into a year, Willow Creek transformed in ways no one could have anticipated. The once struggling town had become a symbol of resilience and hope, thanks to Emma's unrelenting dedication and the partnerships she had formed with Daniel Harper's foundation. The diner was no longer just a place to eat, it was a hub of activity, education, and community support. People from neighboring towns came to see what they called the Willow Creek Miracle, eager to learn how a single act of kindness had sparked such profound change. Emma found herself busier than ever, balancing the demands of running the diner with overseeing the programs she had helped create. The Meals for All initiative had expanded to include cooking classes for families, workshops on budgeting and nutrition, and even a mobile food truck that traveled to nearby rural areas. The job training program, funded by Daniel's foundation, had already helped dozens of residents find stable employment. The ripple effects of these efforts were visible everywhere. Empty storefronts were being repurposed, the local school saw an uptick in attendance, and the sense of community that had once seemed lost had returned stronger than ever. But even in the midst of this success, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was missing. She thought of Michael often, especially on quiet nights when the diner was empty, and the hum of the kitchen equipment was her only company. She wondered where he was, whether he knew the impact he had made, and whether he had found whatever it was he had been searching for. One crisp autumn morning, Emma received a call from Daniel. His tone was uncharacteristically serious, and Emma felt a knot form in her stomach as she listened. "Emma," he began, "there's something I think you should know. Michael's been in touch." Emma's heart raced. "He has? Is he okay? Where is he?" Daniel hesitated. "He's fine. He wanted me to pass along a message. He's been following everything you've been doing here, and he's proud of what you've accomplished. But he also wanted you to know that he's decided to step away from the world for a while. He said it's not goodbye forever, just, for now." Emma felt a mix of relief and disappointment. She was glad to know Michael was safe, but the thought of not seeing him again weighed heavily on her. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her chest at the thought of him watching from afar, still invested in her success. "Did he say why?" Emma asked. Daniel sighed. "He said he still has things he needs to figure out. He didn't go into detail, but I got the sense that he's still searching for his place in the world." Emma nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you for telling me, Daniel. It means a lot." After the call ended, Emma sat in her office, staring out the window at the golden leaves drifting past. She thought about Michael's journey and the role he had played in hers. She realized that, in many ways, they were on parallel paths, both searching for meaning, both finding it in the connections they made with others. The weeks rolled on, and as winter approached, the town began preparing for the holiday season. Emma threw herself into the festivities, organizing a Christmas dinner at the diner that would be open to everyone in the community. Volunteers decorated the diner with twinkling lights and garlands, and local musicians offered to perform carols. The event became the talk of the town, and Emma found herself simultaneously excited and nervous about the turnout. On Christmas Eve, the diner was packed. Families, friends, and strangers gathered together, sharing laughter and stories over plates of food. Emma moved through the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude as she watched the connections being formed around her. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. As the evening wore on, Emma stepped outside for a moment to catch her breath. The air was crisp and cold, and the stars above twinkled like scattered diamonds. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself, her thoughts drifting to Michael once again. She couldn't help but wonder if he was thinking of Willow Creek tonight, if he missed the town as much as she missed him. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" The voice startled her, and she turned to see a man standing a few feet away. He was bundled in a familiar coat, his face partially hidden by the shadows. For a moment, Emma thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but then he stepped closer, and her breath caught. "Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled, his eyes warm and steady. "Hello, Emma." Emma felt a rush of emotions, joy, disbelief, and relief all at once. "You're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think I'd see you again." Michael nodded, his expression softening. "I wasn't sure I'd come back. But then I realized something. Willow Creek isn't just a stop on my journey. It's become a part of who I am." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, not wanting to miss a moment of this unexpected reunion. "You've been watching, haven't you? Everything we've done here, it's because of you." Michael shook his head gently. "No, Emma. It's because of you. I may have given you the means, but you're the one who turned this town around. You're the one who believed in its people, in its potential. All I did was remind you of what you were already capable of." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their connection settling between them. The sounds of laughter and music drifted from the diner, a reminder of the life and love that had blossomed in the wake of Michael's gift. "Are you staying this time?" Emma asked, her voice filled with hope. Michael hesitated, then nodded. For a while. I think there's still more for me to learn here, and more for me to give. Emma smiled, her heart full. You've already given us so much, Michael. And you've given me something too, he replied. A reason to believe again. As they stepped back into the diner together, the warmth of the room enveloped them, and the crowd erupted into cheers at the sight of Emma and her mysterious benefactor. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like everything had come full circle. The town of Willow Creek had been saved, not just by one man's generosity, but by the kindness and resilience of an entire community. And in the center of it all, Emma and Michael stood side by side, proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark a legacy that would endure for generations.